if we don't start close on time, we can't finish close on time, so we better get rolling. I thought we might be a little light tonight, but I'm glad that you're here. We're, you know, the first summer meeting. I know it had, I want to say to you that it's been, we've asked an awful lot of you to come to 8 meetings. And we knew doing it in kind of a compressed period of time that we would have some people in and out and things like that. And so we certainly understand that. I am excited about where this is going, and here tonight with meeting number 7, we're really starting to zero in on a product. And so remind you that our first meeting, or our last, excuse me, we're not starting with our final, I think is what I might have meant to say, is what came out, is 2 weeks from tonight. So we will have had a board meeting the night before, and then we will turn around and do on the 13th, the final meeting. And so I hope that you can make that one. But I'm excited about the work that we've done. I just want to say thank you to you. It's, you will not see me in a tie again until the first day of school. So don't come with those kind of expectations. But anyway, we got them all graduated this weekend, and that was fun and exciting. And so we're, you know, I had somebody ask me at church on Sunday morning, said, "Now you don't have to work in the summer, right?" It is, and we all know that the summer is very busy, but it is at least predictable. And you can say, "Honey, I think I'll be home by X time," and you probably have a chance at making it. And so, but I hope for you and your family that even if you're not in education, that this is a time of year that you can kind of recharge your batteries and enjoy a little bit different taste. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Colson, who I'm sure has lots of work in store for us tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Young. I'm excited to be here. We want to push forward. We are getting closer. I'm going to show you, have another piece of paper for you in a little while that kind of shows you some honed in work as to what have we done and where are we going in Abilene related to the work that we've done. But first, I want to give you an assignment. I want you to read the 2 articles if you haven't already. They're right in front of you. They're very short. It'll take less than a couple of minutes. Read them. They're very recent, within the past year. One of them, I think, is within the past couple of weeks. Read those 2 articles, and I want you to, on one of them, it doesn't matter which one, choose one, and identify and circle, underline a sentence or a phrase that resonates with you, and be ready to discuss why you chose what you did. So on either article, choose something. You said, "Man, that's weird," or "That makes me ask a question," or "That's interesting." And then write down, just in the margin, one question about the article that you'd like to discuss. So read the articles, circle, underline what you're going to do, a sentence or a phrase in one of the 2 articles, and then write down a question or 2 that comes to mind after reading them. Yep, if you need an article, let me know. Have them up here. So as you read, again, underline or circle something that kind of resonates with you think is interesting, just in one of the 2 articles, and then write a question in the margin that you'd like to discuss, or a question that comes to your mind as you read it. As you finish and are ready to discuss, stand up, find somebody else that's standing up, and go talk to them. Tell them what you underlined or circled and the question you have. So as you finish, stand up, find somebody else that's standing up, and go talk to them. Ask the question, talk about what you found interesting. Go back and sit down. At your table, discuss these questions right here. At your table, talk about this, then we'll debrief. So you did this, you circled, you wrote down a question, you had a conversation. Extend that conversation at your group by going to these questions. If the information in the articles is true now, present day, which it is, right? What might be true in 10 years? I bet in 10 years ago, I don't know that all of us thought there would be driverless cars, right? Or automated police officers. In a world that is becoming more automated, what will the work of people be? And what are the implications for schools? And I'm not just talking about Abilene ISD, but I'm talking about Abilene Christian, McMurray, any school, any public school or higher ed, any training institution, right? So, talk about those three things at your table. Go. Somebody start us off. I want to debrief this as a group because I want everybody to benefit from the thinking and ideas of others. And so I'd like to hear just a little bit about what your group was thinking. You can start with, here's a quote that somebody had or that I had, and here's what we talked about, or you can just jump in and say, man, if this is true, this might be true in 10 years, or what is the work of people and what are the implications for schools? I don't care where you start, but jump in. Go ahead.
Here's where we're going to start. So the author of the Dubai article
Yes.
clearly has never seen Terminator 1 and 2, RoboCop, Westworld. People, the computers go crazy and kill everyone. Clearly.
Clearly.
That's where we started.
Clearly, which is a great place to start. The question,
I stole that from her.
the question is it true? So yeah, they have not seen the Terminator or RoboCop.
Or Terminator 2.
Terminator 2. iRobots. Yeah. All right. Keep going. Keep going. Talk to us about what are the.
Ask Dan what he said.
What did you say, Dan?
Well,
on the Washington Post article, we talked about the whole idea of freeing up time so you can work on interesting and more complex work. And so we started analyzing, because we've heard that about technology for quite a while now. So are we currently freed up because of the technology we have to do more things?
So when we have 100 emails bombarding us every day, or when we're on the dock fishing and we have to answer our cell phone because somebody's calling us, because are we ever, is it freeing us up or is it tying us down?
It is, your phone is your leash, right? To the extent you allow it to be. And depending on who your boss is, will determine that some too, right? If they call on Saturday and they expect you to answer it, or they send you an email on, I mean, I have a good friend who is a family friend. He's 25 or 26. He's a friend of my son's. And he literally got fired from a professional position in this wasn't the only issue. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. And it was, his boss sent him an email on a Friday night, and my friend didn't respond to it until Monday morning, right? And the guy was like, dude, I sent that to you on Friday. Well, I didn't look at my phone over the weekend. It's like, well, how old are you, 50? I mean, you look at your phone, right? I can say that. Look at your phone. You can't work here unless you're going to be responsive to the needs of the company. It's a leash.
Grandson last week, my wanted to ask, how could you leave your phone? That was his comment. How could you leave your phone on? You know, and that's just unconceivable.
I heard I heard an interesting argument the other day that people were hounding on those sitting on the couch on their phones and not interacting. And the guy who responded said, you know, he's 30-ish something, grew up basically with technology. I mean, smartphone by the time he was in college and so forth. And so most of his adult life has had a smartphone. And he said, you know, my wife and I don't have an issue with it. We're connected. We're on our phones. We don't care. You care. We don't care. We're perfectly happy doing what we're doing in the way that we're doing it. You might not be happy, so don't sit on the couch with your phone. Right? Was his response, which I just thought was interesting. It's a different context. It's a different perspective. My perspective is put your phone down and talk to one another, right? His perspective was, this is the way we communicate. This is how we're connected. I'm talking to people right now that were in my high school class for which you are not connecting with. I know more about them than I know about you because I'm willing to connect with them. So there's this really interesting balance. College Station just opened up a new coffee shop called the Tipsy Bean. And the Tipsy Bean does not have internet service. And it has a sign out there that says, we do not have Wi-Fi, nor are we going to get Wi-Fi. Sit down and talk to one another. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes them before they get Wi-Fi, in my opinion. Because we had another coffee shop that did the same thing, and now they have Wi-Fi. So it'll just be interesting to see how long it takes. So it's designed to free us up, and it might act as a leash. But in the terms of journalism, what does it mean for journalism? All right? In its best form, if facts and data can be gathered by a piece of software and reported out, number of medals won, who won them, when they won them, what their time was, all the facts, in its best form, what does that free up journalism to do? Analyze? Interviews? What's that? The human perspective? So journalism might be less about when, where, and who, and more about why in the future. Why are you the way that you are? What does it mean for the rest of us? A human interest story. Software is not going away. Automation is not going away. There are going to be more stories written by computers than not in the near future. In the distant future. We had to think about that. What are we teaching our journalism students? How are we teaching our kids to write? What are the implications for our classrooms and our schools? Okay, keep going. Somebody else. What'd you talk about?
Kim brought up a good point that she said she's a counselor and she wishes that someone could deal with like the testing and the automation and the numbers and stuff, so she could actually counsel.
So someone needs to write a piece of software, right? That does all that. Safety and security is, yeah. That's a great point, and somebody will do it, right? To the extent, I mean, there's some out there that's helpful, but to the extent Excel is helpful, right? But there may be a software out there somewhere that can do that sometime. Yes.
But the implication to schools. One thing I thought is things are changing so fast out here. Schools are going to be slower to change, so maybe always behind the curve, behind the wave.
The great school district will always, big organizations are always lagging behind, whether it's Exxon or whether it's a school district, right? But Exxon has the ability to catch up quicker because they don't have all the hindrances we have. The thing about schools, everybody's been to school. So everybody is an expert. Parents or say to you, well, that's not the way we did it when I was in school, right? Rows and desks were good enough for me. Why isn't it good enough for my kid? Put your phone away. Well, they don't need phones in school. You know what? There's not a job you go to that requires, unless it's some sort of high-level safety security type position, where you don't use your phone on a routine basis to check facts, check data, and communicate. Or a computer. The sanitation workers in College Station, Texas have computers in their truck. And they log each time they do something. And is it helpful? Yes. The sanitation workers are connected. The people who read the meters, what do? They just scan it now. They have smart meters. They scan it now. A lot of times people don't even have to come to your house to read the meters now because it's automated, right? It's smart technology. Your refrigerator will talk to you. There's smart refrigerators. There's smart water systems, security systems, all those things. It's not going away. It's not going away. We'll only get more, not less.
Which really has an implication for schools in that we have to prepare them for really higher levels of jobs.
Yep.
They're not going to be a meter reader that goes and writes down numbers anymore.
No.
And that's gone already.
Right.
But there's lots of other things that are going. And I'm not sure we're preparing people, not just in K-12, even in universities, for the world in which they'll work.
Seaton, in a Ford dealership, how much of a technician's work is automated? I mean, the diagnosis mostly?
Yeah, the diagnosis.
Still got to get in there and...
Look up a computer, identify codes or whatever.
Okay. Has that changed over the years in terms of diagnosis?
Sure.
Yeah. My daughter's good friend, his name is Colin. He went to the University of Southern California and got a degree in film, that sort of thing. Smart kid. Got a job as a consultant in Atlanta, Georgia. Hated it. Decided that I don't want to do that. I want to learn how to code. Went back to school for not college or university, but a coding school. And went to an intense 8-month, I think, 6-month, 8-month, something like that, relatively short in the scheme of life type thing. 6-7 days a week, 8 to 5, homework every night, that sort of thing, really intense, college graduates, sharp people, and learned to code. And now he works for Major League Baseball, and his job, among many others, I mean, there are many other people that work with him, is the software end of the video. So he gets video from Major League Baseball and plugs it into all the different outlets that they have, but that is his job, right? Writing software for Major League. It's actually, he doesn't work for Major League Baseball, he works for a subsidiary but he does MLB stuff.
Well, and that's kind of what we talked about at our table. I think we're going to see a societal shift in what the blue collar job is. You know, instead of reading meters and instead of, you know, working in fields and things like that, they're going to need to be able to maintain these machines, know how to take them apart and put them back together and fix them and code them, and they need, that's the new blue collar job in the future. That's what they need to be able to do, and that's what we need to be preparing them for now.
Right. The great balance is that we will always need plumbers. We'll need welders. We'll need people to do those jobs, absolutely, and they need to pay well and so forth. The people that will make a lot of money are the people that own those companies. Not that a welder or a plumber can't make a decent living. They certainly can, and we need to encourage people with that bent that way. But the future is software, right? Everything has a piece of software tied to it. Almost everything, anyway. And so the question is, if we're going to be meaningful and relevant, how do we build on that idea for our students? That what are the implications, man? Should every kid learn to code?
It's not
Or
keyboarding anymore.
What's that?
So it's not keyboarding anymore.
It's not keyboarding anymore. Should every kid have the opportunity to learn to code? Not everybody's going to love it. But should every kid, just like every kid has the opportunity for math, science, social studies, writing, should every kid have the opportunity to learn to code?
If robots can do all this, what's going to stop them from learning to code?
Code, you know, I don't know. That's pretty deep, man. I don't know. I can tell you that I sublet an office from coders. They range from somebody who is non-communicative, literally. I mean, I've never heard the guy say anything, right? But he sits at his, and he tears it up. To, you know, the most gregarious guy in his class, I'm sure, in high school, who's a coder as well. Well, I mean, he codes, and obviously the other guy doesn't go to the meetings, the sales pitches, this guy does. So he's got multi-skills, but it's a range of people that code. It's not just nerds anymore, right? It is the wave of the future. So all of that you read is about software and coding. And I want you to think about, if we're going to make school meaningful and relevant, what are the questions we need to ask? And what are the implications? How does a first grader learn to code? And do they get a chance to? And how do we build it into the system? And that becomes the administrator's job, is to figure that out. How do our seniors get into anime, or how do our high school kids get into animation? And how can they get into artificial intelligence development and so forth? Because there will always be a need for software as we move forward. Huge implications as we think about meaning and relevance. And so that's how we have to think. We can't think of math as the solution to our problems, right? Kids need to know how to do math, but that's not the solution to our future. It's something greater than that. It's something different than what we grew up with. I want to show you something. If you're in algebra and you get an algebra problem, you know, if you're old school, all right, here's algebra 1 problem, 2-step problem. Because I don't know how to do math, I can do this. I can get my question on my phone with a free piece of software. You can't see it. It says, see if I can get it to show up here. Well, that's too bad. Somebody needs to make the software better. There it is. You see it? Minus 6 plus x over 4 equal minus 5. Okay? The answer is x equal 4, because my phone just did it for me. And if I do that, again, it's hard to see, unfortunately. I probably could change the light. But if you came up here and looked, there it is. You got each of the steps, and if I hit, it'll actually annotate each of the steps. What do? Multiply both sides of the equation by 4. You get 24 by 20. What's the next step? You move constant to the right side and change it to its sign. And the bottom line is, you get x equal 4. And I just held it up and took a picture. You should write this down. It's called Photo Math, right? It's a free download. Wolfram Alpha is free. You can put in the most complicated calculus problem in the world on Wolfram Alpha. It's going to do it for you, and it's going to show every step. My daughter has a degree in chemistry from Harvard. She's smart, okay? Doesn't have anything to do with me or my wife. She just, well, I'll give credit to my wife.
She already has it on her phone.
Yeah, good for her. She's smart, off the charts smart, okay? National Merit Scholar, all that kind of stuff. She goes to Harvard. So I learned about Wolfram Alpha. I'm in a session. This guy's talking about Wolfram Alpha. And he says, I guarantee your kids know about this. And I was like, no, they don't know about it. I text my daughter during the session. You ever heard of Wolfram Alpha? She's a junior at Harvard, okay? Chemistry major. She texts me back and says, Wolfram Alpha is my best friend. I couldn't survive without it. So there are free pieces of software that will do your math for you and show you your work. I still think kids need to understand math. It's not enough to know that there's photo math, where you can take a picture of an equation. And this particular one doesn't do anything beyond Algebra 1 right now. But if you go to an Algebra 2 equation and put it in there, you know what its response is? It doesn't say, I can't do that. It says, I can't do that yet. So they're going to develop this software, and it's going to be able to do any piece. And your kids are going to be able to take their phone, take a picture of a problem. They're going to be able to see every solution, and they're going to come up with it. It's software. Math is different. It's not less important, but the way we have to think about math is different. The way we have to think about software writing is different than what we thought about in the past. So if we're going to be a school district, if Abilene ISD is going to be a relevant school district to students who are in kindergarten, in 12 years are going to be seniors, there are going to be a lot of, journalism's going to have to change in the way it's taught. Software development is going to have to become a priority. for kids and learning how to code. How we teach math is going to have to change. It's going to have to take on some meaning and relevance for students. And I think that's what we're saying in terms of what does the future look like. It looks different than at any point in the past, and it's changing so rapidly in terms of what the capabilities are. Give me some feedback. You believe that or you don't believe that? Think it's true? Anybody think it's not true?
A lot of people not in this room think that it's not true.
Why do they think it's not true?
They haven't thought about it.
Because they haven't thought about it? What would if they heard this, they were in here, somebody off the street was in here, and they heard us talking about that, what would they say? You're crazy? What?
I think it would support that. I think the average person realizes it.
Okay.
One thing I did think about though, when you're talking about wanting to code the masses, I thought, well, you better start before the age of 12 because around 15 or 16, most people give up. I think. My kids are in tech classes and 3/4 of people just don't care. But anyway.
Yep, you got to start when they're early. Look, coding is a science. You got to know the language. It's a foreign language, but really what it is what? A bunch of periods and slashes.
Well, it's logical thinking, and that's why they give up. And it's a fault of our system, you know. I mean, what you're talking about in math, that's what we're giving them, and we're not teaching. You know, they don't need to know that because there's something that can solve that for them. They need to know what to do with it. They need to know how to come up with. They need to know where to go to find things. They need to know how to put things together and synthesize, and they need to know quantitative reasoning and logical thinking. And that's why the kids don't like to code, because there's so much logical. I mean, I really have to process through what do I want it to do step by step and break that down. And they don't like to do that because they're not good at doing that because we haven't taught them to do that.
Don't you still have to know something to code though? I mean, if you're coding something, you gotta have an idea of what, like those guys who did that for the math problem, they still gotta know the math and know what the right answer is.
Sure.
So I mean,
we're assuming that they didn't go to Wolfram Alpha to get that, but yeah, at some point, yes, math is important for them.
For whatever, there still has to be some, you know, whatever the content is, content still has to be part of, it may not be the end all, but I mean, it's gotta be, you still gotta know something to tell other people how to do it.
That, and therein lies the rub. Kids have to know how to do math, right? They need to know how to write. And if we valued one over the other, I think a lot of people in the world would value writing now over math, where in the past that was not necessarily true. Kids need to know how to write. Kids need to know how to do math. Kids need to know what the periodic table is and the implications for the elements. Kids need to know the social science. They need to know these things. Content is very important. Content in and of itself, though, is easily forgotten. So our job becomes to bring in the relevance and the meaning as to why is it important that you know this equation. What does it mean to me? What do I have to do? Okay, I love the way you said that. I love what you said too. We can't not teach math. We can't just teach people photo math app.
You put the equation back up.
I can.
I think too, they're saying we teach the masses to code. I think there's still going to be diversity of interests and desire to do different things. I mean, there's still going to be people that want to be artists.
Yeah.
They may not do it by coding, and there's still people that want to be writers. I don't think the world as a whole values writing anymore. I think math is more valued than writing. But I think there still are going to be people who want to write and have that heart for writing, or want to read good literature, and you know. And I'm not anti-coding. I'm
Sure.
more on the coding side. But I just think if we're talking about relevance, we have to remember people have different passions, and so in essence, we've got to provide a wealth of things so they can figure out what that is that they're passionate about and that they want to pursue throughout their life. And, you know, journalism has changed. I mean, journalists started to write. They don't get to write like they used to write.
Correct.
And they are being replaced by the, you know, by a lot of things. There's just not as many journalists as we used to have.
True as well. Well, there are not as many trained journalists. There are a lot more bloggers, right? There are a lot of people writing their own blog on their own dime, saying what they want to say, maybe based in fact. Most of the time it's based in their experience with some facts thrown in. And several people. Look, here's what I think we have to think. All right, this is my wife and I conversation. My wife loves movies. She even likes bad movies. All right? She likes bad movies because she analyzes them and tries to determine why is it bad. Is it bad acting? Is it bad writing? Is it the wrong actor in a great role? She loves that sort of thing. Film festivals, all that. Foreign films. She loves it. Makes me somewhat crazy, honestly, because I have to watch a lot of bad movies. And she talks about them. It's like, well, what did you think about that? I was like, well, I just think I'm going to go to sleep. No, I don't know. But she has a brain that works that way. And I've been encouraging her for years. People care what you have to say about this. She happens to be a Christian, a believer, and so, but she loves films. She even likes films with the F word, okay? So, she likes all films. Because she sees value in them, and she has this unique worldview, right? And so I say to her, people will care what you have to say because of your unique worldview as a Christian related to this film that has these characters in it and this content in it, and I think people would be very interested in what you have to say about this. You need to write about it. You need to start your own blog. Oh my God, I'm not a journalist. It's like, that's the thing, you are. You could do it. You could write your own blog, people would follow it, and even if they didn't, it would be a creative outlet for you to be able to do that sort of thing. So our kids need to be encouraged to do the same thing in terms of writing and publishing. And publishing is different now than publishing used to be. Free website. So I say all of that to say there are a lot of journalists, but just they don't work for the newspaper. They work for themselves.
Two things. One, we know where your kids get their intelligence now.
From my wife, yes.
Isn't coding, though, the same thing as math or English? Irrelevant without a passion?
Yes. Coding without a passion becomes very boring work. In terms of math...
You need coding if you're going to pursue your passion, just like we need math sometimes. I mean, isn't it just one of the founding blocks that we build all our passion on? We pay attention to coding if we need it. I mean, if you're talking about coding, teaching everybody how to code like you teach everybody how to math, is that not just another one of those blocks that we have grown into?
It could be. I think we'd have to guard ourselves. I think the difference is that we don't regard coding as a skill for schools. It's a skill for a select few who are interested in it and who have parents who get them, who they get connected with gamers. A lot of times they're gamers. They get connected with it, and so their group of subset of friends gets interested in it. But we don't, in thinking about the future, what's going to run the future? Software. So let's expose kids to how do you write software. And there will be some that are not interested, and that's great. Well, what are you interested in? Let's pursue that. But there will be some from an early age who are very interested, who can marry that passion and that skill and that science into some complicated stuff, websites and so, do you need to know math?
A STEMS program?
But do you need to know math to code? If you're going to do artificial intelligence, you have to do some complicated math. The guy in my office who owns this company, Connect Technology, has a degree in math from A&M. He tells me that my degree in math has nothing to do with me coding. If I get into something really complicated, maybe. Some artificial intelligence, maybe. But generally, if I can do addition and subtraction and easy multiplication, I can code anything that anybody brings to me.
It's a logical thinking, though.
Yes.
His brain
Yes.
processes that way.
Yes, indeed.
But isn't it more, it's the thinking process through all of this? I mean,
Yes.
it's that higher level thinking process, whether it's done within a writing, whether it's done through art, it is still getting kids in all those different areas to think at a higher level, to think it through logically. I just think that's that's the point. I think the point is to get them to see things, whether it's coding or whether it's through the arts, but to have that ability to think at a higher level.
And so I'm just going to push on that for a minute. How do you do that? As a teacher, how do you do that?
Start in the younger grades, providing them opportunities to problem solve.
And what does problem solving look like?
It could be them coming up with things that are going on at school that they see problems that they work through and brainstorm different ways to fix it.
Okay. I think you're exactly right. It's about thinking. It's about the opportunity to think about important things that are relevant to the kids that you're teaching, whether it's first grade or seniors, right? And it is built around the content that you have, but it's about the application of the content. It's not about the content. It's about the application of the content, which means if you're going to be a relevant and and you're really going to create a meaningful and relevant experience for the kid, you've got to sacrifice some content to get to application.
You need to have open-ended experiences where there's not one right answer, but there's a whole different ways to get to problems.
Very rarely is there one right answer in life. Very rarely. Right. You know, you get into some safety and security professions, there might be one right answer. That's a small subset of the population in terms of, is there one right answer? Most of the time there are multiple right answers, and most of the time it's based on the context of the situation and what the right answer is. I want to show you. David, did you do that problem?
It was my eyesight, not my math skills.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming that the answer was right. Was it right?
Yeah, once I
okay.
got it out of my Bible.
I'm actually pleased to hear that because I just assumed it was right, which was probably not a very smart thing to do. So, you know, speak for myself, my perception of success is it's a straight road. I'm talking about for me in my professional career right now. When I think about success, I think about it as, okay, if I do this, this is going to happen for me, and if I do this, this is going to happen for me, and if I do this. And the reality is, man, we go forward and backward. Our little company, we have a goal in terms of revenue. We're starting several different initiatives. And we've hired new people. We're starting several new initiatives. And I can already tell you that before these initiatives ever get off the ground, our road to success is going to look this. In fact, it's going to go this way a little ways. And then we're hopeful based on our planning it's going to turn back around, and then it's going to go down, and then it's going to go up. We're spending money in hopes of that it will pay off in the long run. And, you know, I had a phone conversation on my way up here. It's like, okay, take a deep breath. This is going to pay off in the long run, but the road to success is very much like that. It's like that for our kids. We've got to give them an opportunity to code. We have to give them an opportunity to think and develop and to go deep with ideas as opposed to stay on the surface. You've got to use the content, but it's not about the content. It's about the application of the content.
Harder to assess that.
It is much harder to assess it.
And, you know, I mean, if we can just use our phone to look up the answers and we have it in class and say that's okay, and we have to look at other assessment tools to determine if we're critically thinking or...
Hey, you're absolutely correct. And so if I painted the future for any school district, and since I'm in Abilene, I'm going to paint it in Abilene. If I painted the future for Abilene, data would look so much different than it looks now. Because right now we collect data based on tests, which is what we've always done. That's fine. That is one way to do it. What if we collected data on an individual class data? We said, Tiffany, collect data on your kid's ability to solve problems, collaborate, and initiate. How could you do that? I bet, given enough time and a conversation, Tiffany could figure out how to collect data on collaboration, problem solving and a kid's initiative for her group. She couldn't do it for the school, but for her group, she could do it. Data is going to have to change from this macro collection of data from every student on 1,000 different standards to a micro view of it, where a teacher is collecting data for their students so it will inform their instruction for their kids.
Can they transfer that to the next teacher?
They can transfer
That learning record to somebody else so they can see where that student was and they can build on that. At least through elementary school, I think that's the advantage you have.
So, in other words, will a kid have a portfolio that travels with them? Absolutely, they should. What is the future of education? Every kid should have a small portfolio that travels with them that shows their writing skills, their thinking skills, their problem-solving skills, their attitude, their initiative. So what does that look like? Well, it's a rubric. It's a one-page rubric that goes with each kid from first grade to second grade to third grade to fourth grade. So when I get somebody in ninth grade, I've got this piece on this kid. Is it everything? No, but does it form me? Yes. So what is the problem with that? If I'm teaching 150 kids, man, that's hard to really look at 150 portfolios and for it to inform me really well. So what is the job of the principal then? Time. A lot of the job of administrators in this becomes time to deal. How do I set up a schedule so that kids can do this? How do I set up a schedule so that teachers can genuinely collaborate and I can hold them accountable for collaboration? I don't hold them accountable for their test scores, hold them accountable for collaboration and coming up with creative ideas. That's what I want to hold them accountable for. It's a different way of thinking. So we have to move away from this macro collection of data to this narrower set of how do we collect data. It's a transformed way of thinking, not a reformed way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking. Questions and comments? Okay. Here are our beliefs. Deep learning. It's about critical thinking, collaboration, and problem solving. Relevant and meaningful student experiences are the core of the classroom. We've been talking a lot about that. Initiative, innovation, work ethic, entrepreneurial spirit are the skills kids need. Strengths and passions lead to success. And then our relationship one. So this is what we believe. I want to show you the work that you did. Help me pass those out. In terms of the vision statement. And then our strategic priorities are on the back of this. I've changed the strategic priorities a little bit to represent our conversation last time and some other feedback I got. So let's look at the vision statement first. A vision statement, look on the vision statement side of that. The vision statement is the statement of a preferred future. It is the preferred future of Abilene ISD. It is short, it is memorable. These are the vision statements that you wrote last time, each one. If I could read it, I wrote it exactly as it was written. And so those are the vision statements that you wrote last time. The last one is mine. The very last one is mine, and I need to add a word in it that I left off of that one. And you can see my wife filled the printer with some paper that she didn't think was written on, and so there's a recipe at the bottom of it. It's not a recipe, but there's a heading for a recipe at the bottom of it. A vision statement is a statement of your preferred future. Habitats is a world where everyone has a decent place to live. In Touch Ministries, proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ to every country in the world. Here is the vision statement that I was thinking of based on what you wrote. I gathered words. We want inspired students, engaged, skilled, and empowered. We want teachers to be inspiring, not robotic. In order for a teacher to be inspiring, they have to be empowered. There's a lot behind that word. We want kids to be engaged. That is, we want them to find school relevant and meaning, and for they put their heart into it. We want teachers to be engaged, which means they have to be empowered and recognized. We want our kids to be skilled, that is, collaborators, problem solvers, coders, entrepreneurial spirit, all these skills we've been talking about. And if they are these three things, then maybe they're empowered, right, to follow their passion, to go do the thing that they want to do in school, in the military, in work, in some sort of training, certificated program, whatever it might be. We want inspired, engaged, skilled, and empowered students. Our preferred future. Take a minute, read and reflect on this, on the vision statement, and the conversation, not just this conversation we've had today, but all of our conversations about pushing forward. Priorities, pushing forward, vision, pushing forward. How might you say it differently than inspired, engaged, skilled, and empowered? Just spend some time thinking about it. Make some notes. Here's what I need from you. As you read these, what stands out to you? As you read these, as you think about them, as you process them, what stands out to you? What resonates with you about these vision statements? Maybe one concept that's there over and over again, or an idea that's there over and over again, or something that's missing. What stands out to you?
I feel like I see potential on here a lot.
Potential?
Mm-hmm.
Love that. Yep, I do too.
Change.
Change.
Where students are motivated to learn.
Where students are motivated to learn. So it's an interesting discussion to have with a group of teachers. Is it your job to motivate kids? Or is it their job to learn? So I would argue very passionately that it's your job as a teacher to motivate, right? Because if it's not your job as a teacher to motivate, then really almost anyone can teach who has the content knowledge. It's your job to motivate. And if I go back to these, we wrote these in such a way where it drives educator action, not student action. We wrote these in a way that says, you know, deep learning involves critical thinking, collaboration, and problem solving. That means I've got to set up these experiences for students. We didn't say all students can learn. That puts the burden on the student, right? So it's an interesting observation that these are about motivating. That motivation is a significant thing in these vision statements. Okay, what else? So, potential and motivation. Keep going.
I think carrying what you were saying a step further, one thing that we talked about is it's going to be a dramatic change in our teachers to get them from where we've been expecting them to be and working toward them being for the last at least 20 years to this.
And so talk to me about what that means, from what you've been working on. You haven't been working on motivating and inspiring. You've been working on...
I'm not talking about that piece. What I'm talking about is when our accountability system has been based on a test.
Gotcha. Okay.
To a very different way to assess and hold ourselves accountable instead of having the state tell us what we're supposed to be holding people accountable for, to move toward, as a classroom teacher, I need to figure that out and assess that. It's going to require a lot of learning on the teacher's part. I mean, we have a generation of teachers. If you started teaching 20 years ago, what we're talking about is a foreign concept to them.
Because why? I agree with you.
Because of the expectations we put on teachers.
Which were about standardization, stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane, do everything the same as everybody else. Benchmark, I mean, that's been our educational system for,
Yep.
since the 80s, really.
It's a world we've lived in. Yep.
Educational reform.
And go ahead, Dan.
Kind of a, I mean, I know exactly, I feel what she's saying, because there's a lot of, in what we've discussed, especially the last meeting and this meeting, it's a pretty radical move.
And uncomfortable.
And uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable good or uncomfortable bad?
I think uncomfortable good, but anytime you throw change on anybody.
And
Keep going.
And well, because you're essentially taking on a public institution, taking on the state.
Okay.
Because there's no, when you think about assessment, your instruction is supposed to be aligned with your assessment.
Yeah.
Your curriculum
Sure.
and instruction are aligned with your assessment. And so, if you're still taking the assessment and you're not necessarily aligning your curriculum and your instruction with the assessment, you run the risk of a drop in scores. I would say, with the population we serve in Abilene, I think that is a significant risk.
I think it is a significant risk too. I think it's interesting how we all talk, and I talk the same way, the assessment. That is an assessment that happens to be significant in the eyes of the state. It's not even really a very good assessment. When you ask one question to determine if a person knows the standard, that's not good test taking. That's not good test making. When you're giving third graders a test that lasts 2 to 3 hours, how long does it last? 2 to 3 hours? That's unwise at best. I say all that to say you're absolutely right. This moves our thinking from the assessment to the state gives a test and we take it and we see how we do on it, to we assess constantly and we adjust our teaching on the assessment we do ongoing with the goal of making school meaningful and relevant for students so that they can get engaged in it, and we empower them and we empower teachers to make decisions about curriculum, instruction, and assessment. That is very different. You're absolutely correct. And there are significant risks associated with it.
You know, I am on board with it. This is, as a professor, this is what I've taught for you. You can ask my students. I mean, I just finished an assessment class where we talked about this ongoing assessment and pre-assessment and then what you do with your data and all that. I mean, it fits in my educational philosophy. I'm just saying there is a range of teachers out there.
Yes.
There are teachers who are going to love this and are going to feel so empowered, and they're so ready to jump in this direction, and they're ready to do amazing things with kids. But we know there is that percentage of teachers who shows up every day and does what you say do, and to get them where you need them to be in this model, what I'm just saying is we're going to have a strong support system and a lot of, I don't want to use the word training because it's really not training, but education of how to make this happen in the classroom. It can, for this group of teachers that are so ready for it, they're going to take it and run with it, and it's going to be exciting in their classroom. And there are those teachers out there in AISD who've been there for a long time and probably have been doing some of this already.
They've been doing it, just not telling anybody, right? Okay.
But then you've got a group of teachers who, you know, are borderline on a growth plan already.
And so,
you know, and it's going to be hard for them.
So what the Gallup data would show is that 30% of teachers are engaged, and that is committed, excited, and enthusiastic about their work, or the 30% Barry's talking about would be excited to run with this. 57% are compliant. That is, just tell me what you want me to do.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Just tell me what you'd like. Show me the lesson plans you'd like for me to teach. Give me the assessment. I'll make sure it gets done. And 13% are actively disengaged, right? So they're the ones going back to their classroom. And when the principal says something, they're going to their neighbor and saying, you know we don't have to do that, right?
Yeah.
Promise you, just close your door, nobody's going to check. So let me ask you this. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to engage in the work of these belief statements and the work of the strategic priorities, which are on the backside of that vision statement? Is it worth it, understanding there are significant risks? I'd love to hear from parents. Is it worth it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But I feel like the parents that feel like it's worth it are going to be sitting in this room. You know, like, I feel like we're the minority.
Yeah, I don't know. That may be true. May be true. No way to know, necessarily.
I think your percentages would fall similar to what he said about teachers. I think about 30% of parents would probably be on board with this, because I talked to enough parents who wish we were doing this kind of stuff for their kids.
So the alternative is to keep doing what we're doing. Right? Right?
Yes.
And so if what we're doing is okay, then there's no reason to change. But I think the consensus, and not just from this group, but from a broader spectrum of this group, is there needs to be a shift in practice, a shift in philosophy, a shift in how do we prepare kids for robots that are going to, you know, take citations and interact with the public, and journalists who are software that is acting in some sort of journalistic way, right? Gathering data, printing. There's another article I didn't print. It was out of China, where they're actually writing articles. It's not just a collection of data. It is an article written by software. And they produced any number of thousand of them in China for during the Olympics, during the Rio Olympics.
You know, Eddie, Christopher was talking about how do we make this happen. And I think the first step is just that we allow it to happen. And that we can't, you know, we talked a couple of times ago about, and I've been thinking a lot about the rollout and all that, that this is not just some edict that you make from the platform, hey, we're going to make this happen this year. And I think we have a certain number of people that are already in the closet doing these kind of things. And it requires a certain amount of us saying, you know what, we value those things too, and keep on keeping on. And I think it almost think it'd be kind of a grassroots development piece. That it just you give some teeth to the people that are trying, the early adopters, and then it'll go to scale kind of in its own time, I feel like, with an adequate support system.
Yep.
Where it's not scary to try something.
And I think too, the principal piece of that is how do we help principals?
The principal PAL, the
Support.
principal piece, okay, yes.
The support, you know, because it's a shift for principals too. I mean, your description is what principals have had to be doing, is making sure your assessment aligns with your curriculum, and that's going away.
No, it's looking different.
Or looking different,
Yeah.
And then how do I, if I were a principal, how do I
Right.
support teachers in this transition, and how do I change the training I've received as a
Right.
principal?
Right.
You need to create an environment where that's okay.
Where that's okay.
And if you create that environment, but I also think we need to assess our performance. You know, I don't disagree with your percentages of engagement, but I think we need to take that 57% that's just waiting for the bell to ring and shrink that to the engaged standpoint. We have to be able to assess our performance, and so we need a baseline.
Yep. And there are tools there are tools to do that are very accurate and research based, Gallup has one, Evolve has one, Berkman has one, and they're very accurate in determining levels of engagement. And they're fairly simple, actually. So to create this baseline of what do we have, and then you look at it not only as a district, but as a campus, right? And within that, who's your supervisor? So it's interesting to track it back to a supervisor, right? Because one supervisor might have 70% of the people that report to them engaged, and another supervisor might have 10%. And it likely has something to do with the supervisor's behavior. And I'm not talking about good or bad, just what they've done. We've raised a group of principals that valued data more than anything, and the data drove the instruction, and the assessment was the state assessment. And we're talking about a fundamental shift in valuing different data based on the skills that we're trying to teach kids: collaboration, problem solving, initiative, risk taking. And so it informs our instruction differently, and so how we go about teaching. So the end result is different. But we raised a group of principals like this, so you can't just wave a wand and allow them to change. You have to give them an opportunity to process this. So this is the way it might look, okay? In another district I'm familiar with, they did something similar to what you're doing and had very similar conversations. And as they got to the end of it, they recognized that, oh my gosh, this is fundamentally different than many of our folks are ready for or used to. What do we do? Here's what they did, okay? They never, and this is 2 years later, they haven't rolled out anything. So they were thinking like you were thinking, we got some teachers already doing this, let's get them together, okay? So they pulled a teacher group together of about 35 teachers from across the district. This district's a little smaller than you guys. They pulled 35 teachers from across the district that are creative, innovative, rule breakers. They're engaged, they're not compliant, they're just as likely to tell their principal, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that, that doesn't make any sense for kids, than they are to say, okay, right? So they got these 35 teachers together, and we set out on this course of what does this look like in a classroom. And do you know, somebody said this earlier, do you know what it was? All they were looking for is permission. What they wanted most of all was permission to widen their lanes, and that meant, don't make me follow the scope and sequence, right? I have to teach my standards. I'm not going to teach the 8th grade standards if I'm teaching 7th grade math. I'm going to teach the 7th grade standards. But don't make me teach them according to this scripted plan. Allow me, in my good judgment, to make some decisions on what to do in terms of scope, sequence, and pacing. Please don't make me take those benchmark assessments. Those don't help me. They do not help me as a teacher. As a good teacher, I already know how my kids are doing. I don't have to give them a benchmark assessment. Those are for you, not for me. Okay? So they were looking for permission to do the very things that we're talking about doing. What's interesting is they didn't believe it when we gave them permission. And I couldn't give it. I'm not the superintendent. So the superintendent committed to every session, right? I was meeting with these teachers once a month. So we'd come in and we'd have these philosophical conversations, and we would plan together. We'd get a kindergarten teacher and an algebra teacher planning together on what math looked like. It was powerful and it was awesome and it was amazing. And then they would have this moment of reality. Is, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be doing what the next teacher next to me is doing. What's my principal going to think about that? Do I really have permission to do this? So every session, the superintendent would come in, and you have permission. Go forth, do well, teach. Teach, you are empowered to go step outside your lanes, do the things that you need to do to work with your kids, to collect the data that you need to collect, to use the assessment. And each time they would come back and say, my principal's asking me a lot of questions about why I'm doing something different than everybody else. My assistant principal is asking me a lot of questions. And every time the superintendent would say, I'll talk to your principal, I'll talk to your assistant principal, you have permission, you have permission, you have permission. We even went through a little exercise. I got them a ball, and I signed, the superintendent signed all of them personally, right? And I gave it to each person and said, you have permission. Literally it says, you have permission, and the superintendent has signed on it. I want you to set it on your desk. And when someone says to you, what are you doing? You're going to grab that ball that says, I have permission. You're going to show it to them. I have permission. It's signed by the superintendent to do this, right? It was a huge deal that we spent most of the year really dealing with, is the whole idea of permission. And so I think in retrospect, should we have started with that group of teachers? I don't know. Now we're meeting with the principals and assistant principals and curriculum, and we're really delving into the belief statements. What does leadership look like that values these things? And it's different than what it's looked like before. So all of that to say, I don't think it's a memo. I don't think it's a rollout. I don't think it is, this is what we're doing now. I think it is a strategy that is much more natural, much more real time based on the circumstances. And so you've got to work with principals and assistant principals. But even then, you don't just say, here's what we believe. You have to say, what does this look like? What does leadership look like? And how do you take it? And so, all of that being said, it is a fundamental shift. It's not a 1-year thing. It's a 10-year plan. And you might get a strategic plan that you just sit on for a little while and use as a document that informs you, as opposed to something you really put out there for people to question and ask you about. Tiffany.
My question is not so much about the permission within the classroom, but that next year when those kids go to that next teacher that may not value that same thing. Or I think of our kids that need RTI, and I'm all about this. This fills me with joy. But I'm thinking of our kids that have any learning disabilities that require specific assessments. What do you do?
Well, and mobility too of students. What do you do? I've been in a teacher, you know, that's doing it like this, and I go to your classroom and you're in a totally different place, and how do we address that?
So those are great questions, and it comes with the territory that it is going to look a little different. And so here's the way I would address that if I were dealing with this issue. If somebody said, we're doing these things and we're doing them well, but here's the issue we've run into. Little Johnny is moving from, he's moving from this elementary to this elementary, and they're at a different place. What do we do? Well, that is a little bit of a problem, but it's not a problem that's not overcomable. So instead of just saying that teach the standards, let's do, instead of a day-by-day scope, let's do a 6 weeks where you got to teach these standards within these 6 weeks. Or you got to teach these standards within these 3 weeks or these 9 weeks. And so it's not, you still have widened the lanes, right? But you haven't taken away the autonomy and the empowerment of teachers. And so while it still creates an issue that you have to deal with that student individually, it creates at least a narrower problem than if you're teaching what somebody else is teaching the last 6 weeks, the first 6 weeks. So in social science, there are all sorts of strategies about that. In social sciences, you could really jump all over the place given ultimate freedom. So you really have to think about it in the social sciences. In math, it's not that big of an issue because it's pretty sequential. In English, you could read this novel, it could be all over the place. So you do have to maybe put some parameters on it if you have a mobility issue. But the parameters are still much wider lanes than what we're used to.
Not even a mobility issue next year.
Yeah, the next year, but you're going to teach the standards. You're teaching the standards, and so the kid's going to have maybe not every standard, but the standards that you determined were the most important based on your wisdom, and certainly the power standards. They're going to have those standards moving into the next grade level.
Well, and one solution is, it's not just about the standards, it's the instructional strategies and what happens in that classroom.
If I go from a dynamic teacher to...
from Tiffany's classroom, who's been part
Sure.
of this movement, and I'm going into a classroom that hasn't, well, then maybe the conversation is, here's what I've done this year. Could we sit down and talk about how that might impact your classroom? And maybe then, if it's real true grassroots, then we bring another teacher on board who's ready to take that next step. And we base it on the student need.
So what I've seen done is exactly what you said, recruit a buddy. Bring a friend of yours that's a teacher, doesn't have to be the same grade level or the same subject, somebody you know that's interested in this, bring them to the next meeting. Let's start to get them involved in the conversation, and that's exactly what we did. And we started to get them, and you know what? They were as excited as they could be. They were even more excited than the first group because the excitement level for the first group kind of waned because they realized that this is a lot of work, right? But they were great, but that next group came in and it was all about permission and the opportunity to do that. So, and you know, if you think about it and you grow it organically like that, naturally, that is much better strategy of how you penetrate a organization than from the top down. If you do something from the top down, there's almost a guarantee that it will not last beyond 3 to 5 years. Because the people who brought it go away, and it was important to the people at the top, not the people doing the work of it. If you use a strategy to grow it from the ranks up, there's a chance that in 5 years it's going to be stronger than when you started it. It's going to start much smaller and grow as opposed to start big and fade. I can speak to this because as superintendent, I feel a little like the Apostle Paul, right? I had one of those experiences where I realized I'd been doing it wrong for all these years. And so people who knew me pre-conversion were like, well, that's not what we talked about before, right? I mean, just to verify, you used to stone me for this kind of stuff, right? Yes, but I realized I was doing it wrong, right? So now we're going to live over here. And so when I lived over there, it was a lot of push down and it was a lot of this is good for everybody, so let's do it. It was met with marginal enthusiasm and it generally faded. When I got a new director of something or something happened or a new principal, it faded. But when we started doing less professional development and more personal learning networks, what do you need to work on? How can you grow that? Then it became more real to principals and to teachers. So, all of that being said, this is a long-term process and not a fix. It is a long-term solution to changing behavior of teachers and principals in schools to make the schools more meaningful and relevant for students that will prepare them for the life they're going to live. More feedback. Give me more. Vision statements. That's where we started that.
So schools before accountability, the era of accountability,
Yes.
were more left to their teachers' world. Had this freedom.
Yes.
So what caused the shift?
That's a great question, and one I'm really glad you asked. So here's what happened. There was a recognition that schools were not teaching all kids and having high expectations for all students. And so in order to address that, it was if we have high expectations for all students, economically disadvantaged, any race, any religion, for all students, then we have to hold schools accountable. How do we hold schools accountable? Well, if we do it with this test, and everybody meets a minimum standard on this test, we can be assured as a state or as a nation that we're having high expectations and that all kids are learning. And there's some value in that. The greatest value that came from the Reformed movement is that all students were expected to perform well. And so in a new generation of transformational thinking, we can't lose that. All students, each child has to be expected to perform well. And so in our metrics, we're still evaluating we're still using metrics for all student groups. Problem solving, creativity, initiative. We're still holding all student groups, or holding you accountable as a teacher for all student groups, not just the kids that have traditionally performed well. And so that is the huge difference between the two. And what we did worked. Let's be real clear about that. It worked in the sense that scores were raised for all student groups. Even the top student groups. Most of the time that is white, economically advantaged students. Their performance went up as well. But for those underperforming groups, most of the time associated with economics, their performance went up well. What didn't go up is their level of student engagement, their level of success after school, right? So we got kids the skills that they, or not the skills, the content they needed to pass the test, but we didn't give them the skills they needed to succeed in life. And then they go on to university or to college, and public schools take such good care of kids. A marginal kid that goes to the University of Texas because they're in the top 7% and they get scholarships, and let's just say they go, or maybe they take student loans, they are more than likely going to fail at the University of Texas, not because they're not perfectly smart, but because they have no resource network. Here's exactly what happens. My daughter went to Harvard. She's a smart kid. She called me one day and said, "Dad, I'm going to fail organic chemistry." And I said, "Hey, you know what, Katie? Don't tell anybody, but I failed political science twice." Okay? Most people would look at me and think, you know, he's a pretty successful dude. He owns his own cars. He has his own house. He's married. He's got 2 children. He plays golf a lot. He's pretty successful. What I'm telling you is, you can fail a class and still succeed in life. Go figure it out. She said, "Well, I want to drop the course." And I said, "No, you're not dropping the course. You're going to get an F if that's what it takes." And this is exactly what I said to her. I said, "Now you know how the rest of us have felt since kindergarten. We're always at risk of failing a class. Now it's finally happening to you." And so she went about, she made a C in the class. She's a successful attorney. What happens for an economically disadvantaged kid whose parents have never gone to college, whose siblings have never gone to college? They call mom and they say, "Hey, Mom, I'm making an F in chemistry." What does mom say? "See, I told you." Man, you can't do it. You can't do it. Why don't you come home and get a job and help the family? That happens. University of Texas has done a really cool little documentary on some economically disadvantaged students and what it took to get them to succeed. They were as smart as any other student at the University of Texas. They had no support network from family or friends. And that's exactly what happened to them. They'd call home and mom would say, "Well, come on home. Get a job, help us support." So, you know, the rich kids' parents say, "You know, I failed 4 classes too. Don't tell anybody." So we do such a good job in public schools surrounding kids. We send them off. They're not successful because we haven't given them the skills they need to succeed. We haven't given them an entrepreneurial spirit or this I'm going to die work ethic. What did he call it? Insane work ethic. We hadn't given them that because it wasn't a priority for us. How do you do that? I don't know. I mean, I think that you teach and you preach it and you develop kids over time in developing this insane work ethic. But it's not through content. I mean, you use content, but that's not the ultimate goal. You can have an insane work ethic and make a C and be a better employee than the person who made an A, right? All right, keep giving me some feedback.
You know, we're talking about change and a major change over time. So I've been thinking of adding a word called evolve.
Evolve?
After empower. So inspire, engage, skilled, empowered. But if we make this paradigm shift or the shift we don't want to stop. We want to make sure that we continue to change, or we'll have to have this meeting 10 years from now because we've changed and we've gotten in another way. So
Yep.
we want to continue to evolve over time and keep that open-minded.
Here,
Or reassess.
reassess. Paul?
Reassess.
Yeah. So here's what this looks like. Houston ISD under the leadership of Terry Greer. Now Terry Greer, he was an ogre, right? I mean, nobody would look at Terry Greer and say he's a really nice guy. Okay, he was a great superintendent. He was very creative and innovative, and the Houston schools performed on any measure far beyond what they are expected to. But here's the kind of thing that they did: instead of shunning charter schools, they became a charter network. Right? They said, "You're doing something right. Come partner with us." So they're charter schools, part of HISD now, as opposed to separated from them. They did open enrollment, where you could go to pick a school. Pick a school. You're interested in that school? Go to that school. Now they've still got some very tough schools. You only hear about the good ones, okay? They've got some very tough schools because not all their kids are motivated and engaged. But if you live in Houston and you want to go to a specialty school, whether it be for fine arts or medicine or business or law enforcement or law or what, you can do that. And they have people trying. So it was a different way of thinking for them. Instead of, we got to keep the charter schools out or they're our competition, well, let's figure out how to use them. And so it's a new way of, it's a different way of thinking. I like that, reassessed. I'll think about that some. Okay? Turn your page over. So this is kind of where the rubber hits the road. So what does it mean? What do we do? If in fact a strategic priority is make classrooms more meaningful and relevant for students, what do? Well, we focus on skills. We design experiences for students that are aligned with student interest and passion. Personalized learning. We value the opportunity for students to make meaningful choices. We prioritize teacher voice on issues of curriculum instruction and assessment. We create a safe space for teachers in order for them to take risks. We value deep learning over content coverage. So if I'm a principal, what does my professional development look like? If I'm a district, what does it look like? Okay? So what does it mean if you have a culture and climate that values collaboration? Recognize that learning is social for both teachers and students. So you create structures to promote these conversations. The value of professional learning communities and create time for PLCs. Model and demonstrate collaboration and professional development opportunities at the state or at the district and campus level. So if you, strategic priority is building these partnerships, you create these models where teachers go to the businesses and work in them. See what's done. Create internship opportunities for students. You bring businesses and organizations in for long-term partnerships. You see the business organizations as an equal partner, not as an add-on. So another strategic priority is tell the story. What does it mean? Create, implement a communications plan that includes short videos and social media that address programming opportunities in Abilene. Human interest stories and successful AISD students, the real world relevance and meaning in your classrooms, high quality staff that impact students, the way that Abilene is impacting the community, prioritize telling the success stories at every opportunity. So that's what it looks like. It's not a checklist of we've done this, which is an easier way to do it. It becomes, okay, if we're going to make it meaning and relevance, what does my professional development look like? How do I give teachers permission to do this? How do I empower the teacher? Because this is a real issue. If Tiffany wants to do something completely different, unless she's a very strong personality, her other 4 teachers who are compliant are going to say, Tiffany, what are you doing? You're making me look bad. Okay? Or an algebra teacher that really wants to set up these meaningful and relevant experiences and teach the less standards, but make these equations mean something to the students in terms of angles and in terms of building and construction and maybe sports and all those things that kids are interested in. If they're going to do that, the algebra teacher over here is going to go, that's not what we planned. I mean, we did these lesson plans last year, remember? And we've been using these for quite a while, and our kids have done well in the state assessment. So, you know, back off. So we have to prepare teachers for that. I mean, they have to have some gumption. Am I right or am I wrong, teachers?
No, I'm a bully.
Oh, good for you. Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm here with you.
It takes strong teachers. It takes strong teachers. I'm not saying there's not a time where you plan together, but you want the strong teachers of the world to influence the planning. So I'm not saying that you don't plan together. I'm not saying you don't even have common lesson plans. What I'm saying is those common lesson plans don't always have to look the way they've always looked. So you influence those around you. And I'm not saying, you know, look, at a high school, you're going to have a one-off. You're going to have an algebra class that nobody can cover. And I happen to know that Forrest is also certified to teach math, but he's really an English teacher. And I'm going to go to Forrest and say, Forrest, I saw where you only have 10 kids in your third period class. I'm going to disperse those 10 kids throughout the course of the day, and you're going to teach Algebra 1 for me third period. And Forrest is going to go, oh, are you serious? And the principal's going to go, yeah, I got to have it, man. I got 28 kids without a home who need Algebra 1 third period. You're the man. And Forrest is going to say, okay. And then Forrest is going to go to the algebra teacher and say, what are you doing? Right? And that's going to happen. It's fine. Right? That's a one-off. That's going to happen. But the standard expectation would not be that. But we recognize that there are going to be some things that happen like that. And that's okay. But the standard expectation would be that you plan time. And the principal's job becomes, how do I allow teachers to plan these things, and how do I resource them to do what they want to do? What would you add to the strategic priorities? Meaning and relevance, culture, climate, and environment of collaboration, partnerships with local businesses and organizations, and tell the AISD story. What would you add?
I don't see a lot of student choice, voice
Okay.
type stuff that we've talked about, I think, every step of the way.
What about the third bullet there on the first?
Valuing the opportunity for students to make meaningful choices about curriculum, instruction, assessment. I think that's the idea. It might be able to be developed a little more.
Well, and the one above it talked about personalized learning.
Yeah, okay.
I still think we need to look at assets of the district, whether it's facilities, or equipment, or tools for education.
I think an outgrowth of this could possibly be exactly that. I'm uncomfortable talking about that just because it does involve bond money.
Well, there is, you know, when you get extra income from CTE and distribution of those types, you do have some more flexibility in funding through the current system, but.
Right.
But I agree. I mean, it is.
I think a natural outgrowth. I think Dr. Young has got to have a conversation with the board and beyond that in the near future. And I think this is a perfect springboard for him to have that this conversation came up in strategic planning, and the natural next step is this piece of it.
On the last bullet, talked about prioritizing telling the success stories at every opportunity.
Yes.
But I think it should also mention in multiple modes. I think that right now our news outlets report what they want, and we have very little control over what, I mean, they report the negative, and I'd like to see a lot more positive in all modes of the media.
Create your news, okay.
So I think it goes kind of back to what we said last time when we were talking about engaging the community in the overall effort of our
I mean, the
About
news,
goals,
the
too.
radio,
Yeah.
you know, social media, I mean, all.
Or the chamber,
all across the
or
board.
the city,
Yeah,
the other,
multiple modes.
Okay?
we can't do it alone. School, we have to have.
That second priority work, you know, that values collaboration, we talked a lot about empowerment. Should that be coupled with collaboration? Because, you know, that giving them permission is empowering them to do something different. So it's not just collaborating, but also just, there's gonna be some teacher that we need to give them the strength to do what they know is right to do.
I like that. We talked about it. I failed to integrate it in. So here becomes the work of the principal, okay? Here's the work of the principal. We're working on this, and you got your small group of teachers, and you're empowering them, and you don't start with the whole staff. You go to 5, right? So let's pretend Dan is still the principal of the middle school. Dan, he's got 5 teachers that can light the world on fire. And he's going to go to those 5 and say, here's what we're working on, okay? I'm going to give you some permission to widen your lane some in terms of the work you're doing, in terms of the assessment, and I'm going to figure out how to get you out of all the benchmark assessments. You just leave that up to me. You don't need to call anybody, talk to me. Dan's going to pick up the phone. He's going to call Abby and say, Abby, with these 5, come on. We can make this happen. So Dan figures that out. So he just gave them some time, right? And he said, all right, for you 5, I want you to plan together. I know you teach different things, but your focus is on meaningful and relevant experiences for students. So I know you teach math, you teach science, and you teach social studies, but I want y'all to talk about what that looks like because your unique perspective will be helpful. And I'm going to give you time. I've got some sub money, and this is how I'm going to spend it. So once every 6 weeks, you're going to get together. Or would you like to do it a different way? Maybe they don't want a sub. Maybe they want margaritas on Friday nights, right? And so Dan said, well, I can't pay for that with school money, but because I'm committed to this, I'm going to give you my own money, right? And so, but he figures it out. Wait. All right. Look, he figures it out is the issue. He says, all right, I'm going to give you some time. So those 5 teachers, man, they have permission. They're not doing the test. They have time to plan, and they're really creating these meaningful and relevant experiences for students. And then, so that's Dan's job. Dan's job also is to identify other teachers that could do this, and his job is to identify the compliant ones and to go to them, and he understands who he can let loose and who he can't, is what I'm trying to say. So there are some people Dan's not going to go to and say, you have the permission to do these things. You're going to go to that one and say, you know that scope and sequence we have as a district? You follow it to a T, right? You follow it to a T because that's going to be the best experience for students for that particular teacher. And then Dan works to develop that teacher into one that he can let run. Right? So the work of the principal becomes a little different in terms of you're not treating everybody the same, you're not trying to do the same thing with everybody. You're really developing these individualized plans for teachers, or at least small group plans for teachers. We're not all doing the same thing in the same way at the same time. Professional development looks different. Expectations look different. You're probably not going to pull all teachers together all day for a staff development session because you're all working on different things. You probably are, on a Tuesday afternoon when you do professional development, you probably are going to introduce new ideas to teachers in the same way for 30 minutes or an hour to help them. But you're not going to do the same thing with all teachers all the time. Same is true for the district. So that becomes the work of the principal. The instructional leadership of the principal becomes that, as opposed to data. It's also helping teachers understand what data to collect. How do you collect? Collaboration, problem solving, risk taking, initiative data. I promise you, you can figure that out with a group of 5 very bright teachers. Well, I'll do this. I'll collect the data in this way. And you use it to inform your instruction, and how can you report it back? So it looks different, and the work of the principal looks different as well.
We've got something like that at the same. We have a group of teachers who are that 33%.
Yes.
So they came to our principal and asked if they can turn one of our portables into a STEM lab.
Love that.
That's okay. So
Good for her.
doing projects and STEM-based activities, and they presented it to our staff, and they did professional development short term, but next year we're going to have a lab where the teachers will monitor the collaboration with the students and the problem solving in different areas that the students will be working on. And our principal backed up and supported them and is trying to help them locate resources to build their STEM lab.
Excellent.
And they're taking that out to the rest of the staff.
Love that. Maker spaces? I mean, every elementary school ought to have a maker space. Every elementary ought to have every middle school ought to have a maker space, which is just simply a room with lots of stuff in it. The kids are given permission to go make stuff. Go in there and figure it out. It's got to be monitored because kids are kids, right? But it's got some electrical stuff, it's got some computer stuff, it's got some engineering stuff, it's got all sorts of things depending on the age of kids. From Legos to drafting to building a computer every school ought to have a maker space, and every principal ought to figure out, man, how do I get every kid in there throughout the course of a week? Just to have fun and play with stuff and make stuff. Schools could have genius hours, right? Where every kid works on something they're very interested in for 1 hour a week. A genius hour. You're a genius. What do you want to work on? You want to work on a bike course in Abilene because you like to ride your mountain bike? All right, let's work on a bike course. You pick your spot of land. Let's go take a picture of it on the weekend. Get your parents to take you out there and take a picture of it. Build a model of what that's going to look like. And then let's contact the landowner and say, hey, would you allow us to do that? And it becomes a problem. So every school ought to have a genius hour, a maker space, allowing kids to do these sorts of things. Principal's job becomes, how do I figure this out? Allow my teachers and the kids the opportunity to do that. How do I use parents as a resource in this? How do I get a local business involved with this? So the work becomes very different than the management of data and the coverage of curriculum and benchmark tests and lesson plans that are alike. It becomes much more free-flowing. It becomes much less, I can put my arms around it, and much more, we're moving in this direction, as opposed to this is exactly what we're doing, step by step by step. That's great feedback. Give me more feedback. What's missing, what's there, strategic priorities.
If those are the words that we're moving towards in our vision statement, I'd like to see more of those words in the strategic priorities to
Okay.
connect those things and make those things full circle.
That's fair. I like that. I can do that.
And I know those things are kind of big. I mean, it still needs to be spelled out because this is like what does that look like? But I still think that we should use some of those.
Okay.
Some of that verbiage.
Good. Holy cow. All right. We're going to move forward with the strategic priorities. I'm going to adjust some of the language in them. I'm going to integrate them some into this vision statement. I'm going to continue to work on this type of vision statement, inspired, engaged, skilled, and empowered. We also put a reassess in there or evolve, and to make sure the words are aligned in both. I think that's great. I think that can easily be done. I have one more thing I need you to do. I wrote a mission statement for Abilene. Vision is our preferred future. Okay? Vision is our preferred future. We're not like this now, but we're going to be. At least we're not like this as a general rule. There are pockets. A mission statement is, man, the work. A mission statement is a purpose, a valued outcome. Why do we exist? Who are we? It centers, it describes the business. So here's an example. Nike, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. That's the work of Nike. It's not to make tennis shoes. It's to inspire. You see that in the design of their shoes, right? We all run faster with a new pair of Nikes, right? Bristol Myers, to discover, develop, and deliver medicines that help patients prevail over serious medical issues. So their work is discover, develop, and deliver. So what might it be for Abilene? Abilene ISD engages and empowers each student to be contributing, responsible citizens, reaching their maximum potential through relevant, innovative, and rigorous learning experiences. Engages and empowers. Responsible citizens came through a lot on the vision statement work. We want them to reach their potential, and we can't get away from this relevant, innovative, and rigorous. And I think that aligns with the beliefs, the strategic priorities, the vision, and the mission. All of those things kind of align together. And none of them are magic. All of them become resources for you as you think through and talk about, what do we work on in Abilene? None of them are magic. All of them become kind of touch points for you. What's our mission? And we're creating responsible citizens that are going to reach their full potential. How are we doing it? We're giving them relevant and meaningful experiences. What do we hope happens in Abilene? Man, we hope we inspire kids. We hope we empower them. We hope that we give them the skills to be successful. How are we going to do it? We're going to create meaningful and relevant experiences. We're going to allow kids and set up opportunities for kids and teachers alike to collaborate and work together and talk together. We're going to tell our story, and we're going to partner. And why are we doing that? Because we want a different future for our kids. The future is different. Robots are writing stories, and robots are police officers. That's why we got to do it. The how we do it becomes outside of the purview of us, but the how becomes the work of David and his team. Dr. Young and his team. How are we going to do this? And I guarantee there are principals in this room with ideas right now, and there are teachers in this room right now with ideas, and there are parents with ideas about how we could do this. And it becomes all of us, our collective responsibility to work on it in meaningful ways for our kids. Do you like that mission statement? Think about it. Take a picture of it before you go. I'm going to leave it up there. Take a picture of it before you go. And our last time together, we'll bring it all together in terms of beliefs, strategic priorities, vision, and mission. We'll have it all on one piece of paper, and we'll look at it together and make sure it aligns. I think it's after 8. So I owe you a few minutes, but I promise you won't get out early next time. I'll try. All right? Good work. Thank you for your feedback. It was fun. You guys have a good Tuesday night.